I have some election news for you. This is from a BBC article from a few days ago, but it's still relevant. State election officials across the U.S. are reporting record numbers of voters casting their ballots ahead of Election Day on November 3rd. More than 22 million Americans had voted early by Friday, either in person or by mail, according to the U.S. Election Project. At the same point in the 2016 race, about 6 million votes had been cast. It's 22 million. Last time it was 6 million. Experts say the surge in early voting correlates to the coronavirus pandemic, which has caused many people to seek alternatives to Election Day voting. On Tuesday, Texas, a state that has relatively tight restrictions on who can qualify for postal voting, set a record for most ballots cast on the first day of early voting. On Monday, the Columbus Day federal holiday, officials in Georgia reported 126,876 votes cast, also a state record. In Ohio, a crucial swing state, more than 2.3 million postal ballots have been requested, double the figure in 2016. So, as the days have gone by, more facts like this have been rolling in. I think one of the more recent ones I saw from Ali Velshi from MSNBC, he said there's 17 times more votes that have been cast at this stage compared to 2016. Now, there's a couple ways to interpret this, but one of the ways is, as they point out in this article, that's just really because of COVID. So in other words, a bunch of people are doing this kind of voting because they're afraid of COVID. They don't want to get COVID. And just because you have the early voting numbers that are very high does not actually mean that like the total number of votes this year is going to eclipse the total number of votes in 2016 or any other election year. It's just that they're coming in earlier because of COVID, and on Election Day, there'll be far fewer people going to the polls. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that it actually is indicative of a really large turnout, and just COVID is not a good enough explanation as to why it's so much more this time than it was in 2016. I don't know which one of those explanations I find more persuasive, but what I do know is that there's reason to believe that this is a good sign for Biden, because usually Election Day is going to go heavily Republican, but all other forms of voting go overwhelmingly Democratic. And so as of right now, this is a good sign for Biden. Now I'm going to get, later on, we're going to talk a little bit about the flip side of that, what Biden's campaign is saying, which is actually, interestingly, a little bit cause for concern for them. They're acting like, whoa, all the pundits are just wrong. Like, shut up. This is not over at all. So we'll get to that. I'll give you a data point, which is probably the single best data point for Trump. And it's a banger, if I don't say so myself. It's crazy. So we'll talk about that. But there's no denying the fact that they're shattering records. In part because of the pandemic. I do think in part because the overall turnout will probably be higher than it was in 2016. But things are going to be a mess, man. I keep saying that. The best case scenario you can hope for with this election moving forward is either a huge Biden win on election night or a huge Trump win on election night. And I'm talking about not for the substance of it or the politics of it. I'm just talking about to avoid existential chaos. Because the nightmare scenario, which we've discussed on the show previously, is this thing called the red wave. The Red Mirage is what it's called. And what that is on Election Day, it's going to be way more Republicans who vote in person because Republicans generally like to vote more on the day. And it can look like the Republicans are doing much better than they are, but then by the time all the votes are cast, it's going to flip a lot heavily more Democratic, and so it could look like the Republicans win or Trump wins, and then Biden actually ends up winning by a pretty comfortable margin. And if you think this is like conspiracy talk, guys, listen, election experts can tell you this. We've known for a very long time. Like, it's the same reason why when it was Joe Kennedy versus Ed Markey, early on, it looked like Kennedy had a little bit of a lead, and then Markey overwhelmed him and won. And the reason why is demographics and, urban versus city versus suburban versus the word I can't say, rural. And so we know that certain areas are more likely to go pro-Trump, certain areas are more likely to go Biden. And so, like, just like you could see it within a given state, like with Bernie in 2016 in the New York primary, Hillary won all the cities, Bernie won all the areas that are not cities, and we saw the trends and we knew what it would look like when it comes in. So in other words, it's possible to have a head fake when you're counting the ballots, where it looks like, oh, this person's way up. Oh my God, now they're getting crushed. You can have those big swings. And what we know is, because this is what the experts tell us, that is very likely to happen on election day, where you have the Red Mirage. It looks like the Republicans are doing really well, and then it'll be a giant swing in the other direction because all the mail-in votes are overwhelmingly Democratic. So anyway, listen, I digress from that, but records are being shattered right now. Records are being shattered. Is that potentially cause for a little bit of a sigh of relief among Democrats? Maybe. It maybe is that, if I'm being honest, but at the same time, they themselves are saying, no, do not look at it like that. Please do not look at it like that.